Nations are facing, let's talk climate now, facing climate talks in Azerbaijan. They say that carbon pollution levels continue to rise worldwide despite dropping in the US and in Europe. According to the Global Carbon Project, a group of scientists who track the world and countries' carbon emissions this year, the world is on track to release 41.2 billion tons of main heat-trapping gas into the atmosphere. That's a 0.8% increase from 2023. The carbon polluting jump comes as several UN reports say that the globe has to cut emissions by 42% by 2030 to possibly limit warming to an internationally agreed upon threshold. The top leaders of the 13 largest carbon dioxide polluting countries will not appear at COP29. Surprise, surprise. Now, their countries, of course, are responsible for over 70% of 2023's heat-trapping gases.
Have increased again in 2024, and we're clearly not doing enough on a global scale to reduce emissions. It's as simple as that.
If we take today's levels of emissions, we've got 6 years. So, it's massive cuts that we have to do. I mean, there are some good news stories here. So not all the countries are increasing emissions. So there's the United States and Europe are decreasing emissions. There's a rollout of renewables in some countries that has to accelerate. So, although the general message is sort of slightly gloomy, there are some positives there.
All right, joining us live from Baku in Azerbaijan at COP29, our award-winning correspondent, Ovieteme George. Ovieteme, look, we played your Ogoni reports 29 years after. Fantastic stuff, really enjoyed that. Tell us, we of course had you on the morning show earlier today. You've been working overtime. Ovieteme, what is the mood of the attendees at COP29? Are we to take them seriously, or as the critics would say, is this another talk shop?
Well, Rotus, thank you very much. If you talk about the mood, I would say cautious optimism. A convergence of the world in a city called Baku in Azerbaijan. Of course, usually what happens every year, they come talk about climate change, its effect, adverse effect on the world, particularly underdeveloped or poorer nations who bear the brunt of daily gas emissions, greenhouse emissions into the atmosphere. So when people come, the expectation is discussions would take place at very high levels, policies would be made, and then decisions will be made also, and then followed up with action. So from COP23 at the Expo City in Dubai to COP28 at the Expo City in Dubai to COP29, a lot should have happened, but it appears it's at a slow pace. Well, $100 billion always budgeted to help poorer countries dealing with climate change. But with the United States of America re-electing Donald Trump, President-elect, second missionary journey to the White House, it appears it's a bit shaky when it comes to the area of financing. Why did I say so? Wednesday last week, Trump said, he described the Green New Deal as the biggest scam in the world. If that would be coming from the President of the United States of America, do you think he would want to invest in that? Well, like I said earlier, cautious optimism, maybe he has to change his mind, but that is the expectation here, that countries that are better off economy-wise should come together and help the poorer countries who daily have to deal with climate change, the adverse effect, sea level rise, pollution of the lands and waters. These are issues even highlighted in the Ogoni report. That's what the people have to contend with. But here, from different nations, hope for tomorrow as they approach a period when they can confidently say net zero gas emissions, net zero carbon emissions. Is that possible? Not in the next few years, I think, Rotus.
Ovieteme, just one more question for you. I mean, look, you've covered this, time and again in Bayelsa, much of the South, a lot of the environmental issues going on at home. Again, as you mentioned in your great report on the Ogoni land there. Ovieteme, what lessons can we take from what you've observed back home? Are there any lessons on climate? Or are we doing enough back home in Nigeria to where we can say we are representing what is being discussed over in Baku where you are?
Well, I've learned so much going to visit such polluted sites in the Niger Delta, including Awoye in Ondo State, that is a larger local government area, that's in the southwest, to Goi, to Bomu, all that in River State, Ogale, Eleme, technically also Ogoni, and then Bile, of course, Bile and Ogale, 13 farmers that won the case against Shell when it comes to that issue of global claims, scaling the hurdle to contest. Now, the government of the day, where are the regulations when international oil companies come to explore and exploit for oil in Nigeria? The communities bear the brunt firsthand of the pollution. The fishes die, aquatic life always endangered. Then, of course, if they can, swim to safer seas and safer rivers. But the government should learn something back in Nigeria, that you must protect your people. International companies will come, international companies will go, but your people remain there to assess the level of governance in such country. Look at Nigeria, for instance, the Niger Delta, which is the focus. Come follow me if you can. June 1956, oil was discovered in commercial quantity in Oloibiri, that is Otabagi, popularly called the Oloibiri oil fields. What has happened in that community, Otabagi? Not much can be said. Now go to Ikarama in Yenagoa local government area. Not much to talk about that. Okay, the Bahrain Kingdom axis of Yenagoa local government area, which has Obuna, Okolobri, Barantoru, gas is being flared there consistently. The one that actually gives the people more concern, haven't gotten used to gas flaring, is well testing exercise by yet an international oil company in that area. Whenever the wells are tested, there's this shaking, more like a little tremor, shaking the buildings, and then when it rains, the water that drops into their basins and containers look black, more like, I am not a scientist, but one can easily say consuming such waters over time could even lead to carcinogens or something, more like benzene being in the water in Ogoni land, 99% more than what United Nations is talking about. So the challenge is the government of the day. Now, President Bola Tinubu is the man in the seat there. He's the man in the saddle. He's the man in Aso Rock. He can be different if he wants to. He can be different if he gives instructions to the regulatory agencies like Nostra. Take action. Stiffer penalties should be meted out to international oil companies who go contrary to the General Memorandum of Understanding and do not apply best practices back in their own countries, in The Hague and also in the UK. They adhere to strict rules because they are liable to pay so much, and they will pay through their noses. That is the reason they try to avoid that. And of course, those persons in those countries, they have shares in those companies. But back in Nigeria, nothing happens. Even the local companies, I say so, indigenous also, as Shell, Chevron, Mobil are divesting. They are selling their assets to the indigenous companies who oftentimes are guilty of the same offense. You may think because they are indigenous, they should be more compassionate to the environment, compassionate to the people, but they're even faring worse because it appears there's no regulation. This is not an indictment on Nostra, but then it's a call for Nostra to wake up. I'm talking about the National Oil Spills Detection and Response Agency. They should wake up as members of that agency. That is the best thing we're talking about here. Protection of the people. Health is wealth. Yep. Health is of great concern. And that dominates conversations here in COP29. When you say somebody can make so much money, a community or a state or a country can make so much money from carbon streaming, carbon capture, what about the life of the people first? If the people are alive, then they can have such money. But if they are not, the monies could be sown into their graves.
Great stuff. Ovieteme, George, you're doing great work. Thank you so much for the updates from Baku in Azerbaijan at the COP29 summit. We appreciate all your work.